Sign it, Arthur. Don't make this more pathetic than it already is. I looked down at the divorce decree on my scarred wooden kitchen table. Across from me, my ex-wife, Elena, adjusted her 2000 Prada sunglasses. She didn't need them indoors. She just wanted me to see my own reflection, a man she believed was a bankrupt, broken down shell of a husband. Behind her stood a lawyer who looked like he'd been carved out of a block of ice. They were there for the final cleanup. They wanted the deed to this house, the last asset they thought I had left. Elena smirked, leaning forward. You're a sinkhole, Arthur. My boss, Julian Vane, says men like you are the dead cells of the economy. You just take up space until someone stronger cuts you away. And today I'm the scalpel. I didn't tell her that 10 minutes. Before she walked through that door, I had received an encrypted ping on my secure laptop. It was a request for a final go-no-go decision. On a multi-billion-dollar acquisition, the very acquisition her god-like boss was betting his entire career on. I didn't tell her that Julian Vane didn't even know. The name of the man he paid $5 million a year in discretionary consulting fees. He only knew me as the Wraith. I picked up the pen, but I didn't sign the property transfer. I simply tapped the cap against my chin and looked her in the eye. Elena, I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake, you've always had a problem with due diligence. You see the surface and think you've mapped the ocean floor. You think you're walking away with the prize, but by the time the sun sets today, you're going to realize you've been standing on a trap door and I'm the one with my hand on the lever. She laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. She had no idea that her world was about to be liquidated. To the world, I was Arthur Vance, a retired middle manager who had lost his shirt in a series of bad tech investments. That was the narrative I'd let Elena believe for the last 3 years. Why? Because when you're married to someone who measures love by the height of a bank balance, the only way to see their true face is to go broke. And boy, did she show me. The moment the bankruptcy notices started arriving, notices I'd carefully forged and mailed to myself, Elena's for better or worse clause. Expired, she started sleeping in the guest room. Then she started working late for Julian Vane, the CEO of Apex Global. Julian was everything I pretended, not to be loud, flashy, and obsessed with being the alpha in every room. Elena didn't just work for him. She worshipped him. She saw him as the future, and me as a relic of a failed past. Look at this place. Elena spat, gesturing to my modest living room. It smells like dust and failure. Julian's office at Apex has a panoramic view of the entire financial district. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm at the center of the world. When I'm here, I feel like I'm in a waiting room for the morgue. The house is paid for, Elena, I reminded her gently. It's stable. Stable is for horses. Arthur, I want velocity. I want leverage. She slid another document toward me. This is a waiver of interest. You're going to sign over your remaining equity in this property. In exchange, convince Julian not to sue you for the mismanagement of the investment fund I brought to you 3 years ago. You remember that 500,000, it's gone. You lost it. That's fiduciary negligence. I almost smiled. That 500,000 hadn't been lost. ID moved it into a blind trust, compounded it at 14 annually, and used it as the seed money for a short position against her own company's subsidiary. I turned her loss into 5 million, but she didn't need to know that yet. Julian is a visionary, she continued, her eyes gleaming with a fanatical light. Right now, Apex is finalizing the Titanium Holdings merger. It's the biggest deal of the decade. Once the letter of intent is converted into a binding contract this afternoon, Apex's stock will 10x. I have stock options. Arthur, it'll be worth more than you ever were in your prime. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a hiss. And the best part? Julian has an anonymous advisor, a genius, someone the industry calls the Wraith. This advisor has been guiding Julian's every move, feeding him the exact data points to crush the competition. Julian says with the Wraith in his corner, he's invincible. The irony was so thick I could nearly taste it. Julian Vane was a peacock. He was a brilliant salesman, but he couldn't read a balance sheet to save his life. He relied entirely on the ghost reports I sent him through a double-blind encrypted server. He paid a premium for my anonymity, thinking he was hiring a secret weapon. In reality, he was hiring the man whose wife he was currently trying to steal. The titanium deal, I said, leaning back. That's a bold move. Very high capital expenditure. If the debt-to-equity ratio isn't perfectly balanced, a single hiccup in the supply chain could trigger a technical default on Apex senior loans. Wouldn't you agree? Elena blinked, her brow furrowing for a split second. What do you know about debt ratios? You couldn't even manage a lemonade stand. Julian has it under control. The Wraith has vetted every line of the contract. Has he? I asked, a small dangerous smile playing on my lips. Or did he just tell Julian what Julian wanted to hear? The lawyer, a man named Sterling, checked his watch. Mr. Vance, we're wasting time. My client is offering you a clean break. Sign the equity transfer, or we proceed with the litigation for asset recovery. We will strip you of everything, including your pension. You want the house? I asked, looking at Elena. I want you to have nothing, she corrected. I want you to feel the weight of your own insignificance. I picked up the pen again. I didn't sign the transfer. Instead, I wrote a single string of numbers on a post. It note and pushed it toward her. What is this? She asked. Annoyed that, I said, is the ISIN code for a specific bond issue. Tell your visionary boss to look into it before he signs the titanium merger at 4 p.m. Tell him it's a gift from a dead cell. Elena snatched the note, crumpled it, and threw it at my face. You're pathetic. Keep your scraps. Well, see you in court for the house. As they slammed the door, I didn't get angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt the familiar cold rush of a predatory shark, sensing blood in the water. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life, displaying a complex web of corporate entities, shell companies, and real-time market data. I logged into the encrypted portal. My username, Wraith01. There was a message waiting for me from Julian Vane. It was desperate. Wraith, the board is nervous about the titanium debt trap rumors. I need your final confirmation that the asset is clean. If you give the word, we sign in 2 hours. Wire for your final consulting fee of 1M is sitting in escrow pending your green light. Answer me. I looked at the crumpled post. It note on the floor. The Eisen Code D given Elena was for a toxic asset, a hidden debt obligation buried in titanium holdings that I had personally engineered months ago. If Julian signed that deal, Apex Global wouldn't just be buying a company. They would be buying a suicide vest. I began to type, the beauty of being a ghost is that you don't need to fire a gun to win a war. You just need to move the decimal point. I spent the next hour activating my networks. First, I called my contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission SEC, not as Arthur Vance, but through a routed voice, modulated line that identified me as a whistleblower of record. I tipped them off to an imminent irregular transaction involving Apex Global and a failure to disclose contingent liabilities. Next, I reached out to the CEO of Vertex Corp. Julian's biggest rival, the titanium deal is a feint, I told him, my voice disguised by the software. Apex is over, leveraging in 60 minutes. They will be vulnerable to a hostile takeover. If you have the liquid reserves, start moving into position. I want a block trade, ready the moment the news of the default hits the wire. Who is this? The Vertex CEO asked, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and greed. I'm the person making you the richest man in the sector, I replied. Just be ready. Then I turned my attention back to Julian Vane. He was calling my private, encrypted line. I let it ring and ring and ring. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. He was a man who thrived on certainty, and I was about to give him a masterclass in volatility. Finally, I picked up Wraith. Julian's voice boomed, though I could hear the tremor of anxiety beneath the bravado. Where have you been? The board is in the conference room, Elena. My assistant. You know her, she said. She saw some bankrupt loser today, who gave her a bond code. She thought it was a joke. But I looked it up, Wraith. That bond, it looks like a poison pill. Tell me it's not real. Tell me titanium is solid. I leaned back in my chair, watching the clock. 3:30 p.m. Julian, I said, my voice smooth and clinical. The bond is very real. It's a cross-default trigger. If you acquire titanium, that debt becomes yours. And since your current liquidity is tied up in the acquisition costs, you won't be able to service the interest. Within 72 hours, your creditors will call in your senior notes. Apex Global will be forced into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. But you told me to buy it, Julian stammered. Your last report said. Titanium was the key to market dominance. Why would you change the recommendation now? I didn't change the recommendation, Julian, I said softly. I just waited for the right moment to show you the valuation gap. You see, information is like a fine wine. It's all about the vintage. I'll pay you, Julian shouted. Double the fee. 3 million. Just tell me how to fix it. How do I neutralize the bond? It's too late for a hedge, Julian. You've already signaled the market. If you back out now, your stock drops 40 on the lack of confidence. If you move forward, you go bankrupt. You're in a pincer maneuver. Who are you? Julian whispered. Why are you doing this to me, Not doing anything to you, Julian, I replied. I'm just letting the market correct itself. You like to talk about dead cells being cut away, don't you? Well, consider this the surgery. I hung up. I checked the live feed of the Apex Global headquarters. Reporters were already gathering. The whisper numbers were hitting the floor. The anonymous advisor had gone dark, and the visionary CEO was trapped in a glass tower with no way out. But the best part? Elena was right there next to him. She had hitched her wagon to a falling star, and I was about to make sure she felt every inch of the impact pause. I looked at the divorce papers again. I picked up the pen and finally signed them, but not the property transfer. I signed a notice of rescission, citing fraudulent inducement and undisclosed conflict of interest. I wasn't just keeping the house. I was about to take her entire world. The next 48 hours were a symphony of controlled chaos. While Elena was busy packing her designer bags to move into Julian's penthouse of the future, I was watching the candlestick charts on my monitor bleed red. The rumors I'd planted were spreading like a virus through the financial forums. Apex Global's titanium acquisition a debt trap? The headlines were subtle at first, then deafening. I received a frantic phone call from Elena at 9 a.m. the next day. She didn't sound like a woman about to become a multi-millionaire. She sounded like someone standing on the deck of the Titanic. Arthur, what did you do? She screamed into the phone. Julian is in a closed-door session with the auditors. Someone leaked the internal risk assessment, the one only the Wraith had access to. The stock is down 15 in pre-market trading. Did you tell someone about that stupid bond code? I'm just a bankrupt old man, I said, sipping my coffee. Who would listen to me? Besides, I thought Julian had everything under control. Isn't he a visionary? You're lying. You're trying to sabotage me because you're jealous. She was hyperventilating now. It doesn't matter. Julian is going through with the signing today. He's going to prove the market bears wrong. And when he does, going to make sure the lawyers come for this house twice as hard. You'll be on the street by Monday. I look forward to it, I said, and hung up. I checked my second monitor. Vertex Corp, Julian's rival, had just finished their capital raise. They were sitting on $3 billion in cash, waiting for my signal to execute the hostile takeover bid. I sent one final message to Julian Vane's private terminal. It wasn't a report, it wasn't advice. It was a simple countdown timer set to expire at the exact moment of the signing ceremony. I then dressed in my best suit, a bespoke charcoal wool that I hadn't worn since I retired. I looked at my reflection. Arthur Vance, the broken husband, was gone. The Wraith had stepped out of the shadows. The Apex Global headquarters was a monument to glass and ego. Reporters were packed into the lobby. Security was tight, but I didn't enter through the front door. I used a restricted access card, a perk of being the company highest paid consultant for 5 years. I walked into the 50th floor boardroom just as Julian was picking up the gold-plated pen. Elena was standing behind him, looking radiant in a white suit, her face fixed in a mask of triumph. The board of directors sat around the table, looking like they were attending a funeral they hoped would turn into a wedding. Julian, I said, my voice cutting through the hushed murmurs. I wouldn't sign that if I were you. The room went dead silent. Elena's jaw dropped. Julian looked up, his eyes bloodshot, his tie loosened. Arthur? Elena gasped, her voice cracking. What the hell are you doing here? Security! Get this man out of here! Wait, Julian muttered, staring at me. He looked at the post-it note I'd given Elena, which was now taped to the side of his laptop. Then he looked at me. How did you get past the elevators? I own the elevators, Julian, I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. In fact, through a series of holding companies and offshore trusts, I own approximately 14 of the debt that currently keeps the lights on in this building. You're insane, Elena spat, stepping forward. Julian, he's a loser. He's bankrupt. He's just here to make a scene because I'm leaving him. I ignored her. I looked directly at Julian. The titanium deal is a liquidity trap. The moment you sign that paper, the acceleration clause in your senior debt kicks in. You'll be insolvent by the time the ink dries. But you already know that, don't you? You're hoping the market doesn't notice until you can flip the assets. Who are you? Julian whispered, his hands trembling. The man you've been paying $400,000 a month to think for you, I said. I'm the ghost in your machine. I am the Wraith. The room erupted. The board members started shouting. Elena backed away, her face turning a sickly shade of gray. You? She whispered. No, no, that's impossible. You're Arthur. You're the man who lost everything in the tech crash. I never lost anything, Elena, I said, turning to her. I just simplified my life to see who would stay when the money went away. You didn't even last 6 months. I turned back to Julian and threw a thick folder onto the table. That is a cease and desist order from the SC. Serve to me as your advisor. And this, I pulled out a second document, is a tender offer from Vertex Corp. They are offering to buy Apex Global for pennies on the dollar to save it from the bankruptcy you just walked it into. I didn't sign it yet, Julian screamed, throwing the pen across the room. I haven't signed. I can still back out. Actually, Julian, I said, checking my watch, your chief financial officer signed the electronic transfer of liability 10 minutes ago, based on the green light report I sent from my terminal this morning. The one you authorized me to send on your behalf in our contract. Julian fell back into his leather chair, his face ghostly white. He was ruined. Not just broke, criminally liable for a massive failure of fiduciary duty. Elena was staring at me as if she'd never seen me before. She rushed over, trying to grab my arm. Arthur, honey. I didn't know. Julian, he tricked me. He pressured me into the divorce. We can fix this. We still have the house. We can. I pulled my arm away. The house, Elena? You mean the one you tried to strip from me yesterday? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the divorce papers I'd signed. I handed them to her lawyer, who was standing in the corner, looking like he wanted to vanish. The divorce is final, I said. But there's one thing you missed in the pre-nuptial agreement we signed 20 years ago. You remember the clause about infidelity and asset dissipation? Elena froze. I've spent the last 3 years documenting every cent you spent of our money on Julian, I said. Every hotel, every gift, every dinner, under the laws of this state. That constitutes a waste of marital assets. Not only do you get nothing from the bankruptcy you thought I had, you actually owe my estate $2 million in restitution. I don't have one. $2 million! She shrieked. I know, I said coldly. That's why I've already placed a judicial lien on your jewelry, your car, and those stock options you were bragging about, which, by the way, are currently trading at zero. I walked out of the Apex Global building as the first police cars arrived to escort Julian Vane out for questioning. The visionary was being led away in handcuffs, his 5-0 suit wrinkled and stained with sweat. Elena followed me to the curb, sobbing. The Prada sunglasses were gone, replaced by eyes red with terror and regret. "Arthur, please," she begged. "Where am I supposed to go? I have nothing." I stopped and looked at her. I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel satisfaction. I just felt a profound sense of clarity. "You wanted velocity, Elena," I said quietly. "You wanted leverage. This is what it looks like when the leverage works against you. You spent years looking down on me because I didn't shout my worth from the rooftops. You thought quiet meant weak. I signaled for my car, a black, unassuming sedan that pulled up to the curb. "Here's a final piece of advice," I said, as the driver opened the door. "In the world of high finance, the loudest person in the room is usually the most vulnerable. And in the world of family, the person who loves you the most is the only one you should never ever try to bankrupt." I got into the car. "Wait," she cried, tapping on the glass. "What am I supposed to do?" I rolled down the window just an inch. "Do what you told me to do, Elena. Sign the papers. Don't make this more pathetic than it already is." As the car pulled away, I watched her in the rearview mirror. She was standing alone on the sidewalk, surrounded by the towering glass buildings she had so desperately wanted to own. She looked small. She looked insignificant. I opened my laptop one last time. I deleted the Wraith 01 profile and initiated a permanent wipe of the encrypted server. The Wraith was going back into the shadows. I had enough money to live 1,000 lifetimes, but as I drove back to my quiet, dusty house, I realized the only thing that truly mattered was the silence. The war was over. The debt was settled. And for the first time in years, the balance sheet of my life was finally in the black.